And when I say advocate, it's not like I was going out protesting or doing anything about it. I mean, I was just, my opinion was that as far as how I felt about kids and their freedoms, especially teenagers, that they were treated badly and they should have the freedom to do what they want to do and things along those lines. And what schools were doing is ridiculous. So I always had that opinion, but I really started thinking about how the way you bring up kids and what they're exposed to, and how if they're just brought up in government schools and just exposed to all this brainwashing and all this stuff, how they're going to turn out, and that relationship with the government, that they're really just being passed from the parents to the government. And we've done some shows on this. This is more of, I guess, a summary type show of taking all of these things and bringing them together, as opposed to just doing a show on CPS or just doing a show on schools or peaceful parenting or something like that. It's more of taking all of these things that affect kids and how they're examples of how they're owned by the government and how they have no rights, and going through all of these things as opposed to just focusing on one area. So that's what we plan to talk about tonight. I have a couple other stories that I may go through towards the end of the show that are just, there was one article that reminded me of democratic socialism and Bernie Sanders looking at Venezuela and what's going on there. And also the police. There's an article in Venezuela about what's going on with the police over there. So we may get to that. If not, I still, what I've been doing is keeping track of what I go through and what I don't, and make sure that we save these articles, because I'm not really a show that is like the news where I have to be current. And when I say current, I just mean like that day that I have to talk about whatever goes on that day. I mean, a lot of what I talk about is philosophical or, that kind of mixed with news. I definitely like to get concepts and things like that in there along with news, but at the same time, it doesn't have to be news that happened today or last week. It could have been last year. It could have been, of course, I don't go too far back, something that's not relevant anymore, but we go far back, go into history to show that, okay, look, this was going on for this amount of time. But I like to focus on a lot of things that really are relevant as far as the timing. Whether I talk about this today or next week, it doesn't really make a difference. And I always like to have something like that in my show. So I do like to kind of mix it up. That's one of the things I was talking a little about this yesterday, of different formats and how I'm open to different formats of the show and doing things differently, but I'm never going to compromise what the goals are of the show and the points that I'm trying to get across. It's just maybe there's better ways to get them across. And I would definitely listen to anybody who had any ideas to get those across. So you can always email me. Go to NonPartisanLIbertyForall.com to get all that information, or any of the Facebook pages. You can send me a message if you have any ideas. But I'm always open to changing up formats or coming up with new ideas for segments, and we've tried different things on the show where we had Thomas Woody doing police news for a couple months where we'd take the first hour, but it ended up going like where we did a whole show on just police stories. And I thought we started to get kind of repetitive where we did, 2 hours on just police stories because there's just so many. And I don't know if that was too much of it for people, where listening to 2 hours of just stuff the police have done was too much, and cut it down. So, okay, let's do police stories for an hour and then do something else. Because again, the entertainment is a huge part of the show. It has to be. You have to entertain to get the information across as well. Because if it's boring, and I played like some video yesterday from a guy who was somehow a democratic socialist and an anarchist, or Howard Zinn, and just how I'm talking about this and how I think that type of thing. So, and even with changing it up where, okay, I'm not going to do a whole show on one subject. I have my main subject, and that's what I'll put in the event. But then at the same time, we'll cover some different stories briefly in the show and talk about some other things as well. So, and you are welcome to call in 702-470-7664. That's 702-470-7664, or Skype, NonPartisanLIbertyForall, one word, send a contact request. So I want to start with CPS, and we've done shows about CPS and how bad it is, and talked about Carlos Morales, who I tried to get on the show once but just ignored me. So that was a while ago. I've kind of gotten to the point now where I've gotten out of interviews where I like more, if I have somebody on the show, to have them on the show to comment on whatever we're talking about. Where, like, I had Shire Dude on the show. I've never had him on the show before. That was the first time. And instead of taking a whole show and interviewing him, which I think I am good at interviewing people, I think, and I've been told that, but I'm kind of done with not done with it, but I'm not at a point where I want to sit and interview people that can be interesting, and definitely people with different stories. So there's interviews that I've done that I think are very interesting, but I kind of got tired of, interviewing activists and that whole thing, but who knows what the future will hold. But anyway, so we have talked about CPS before, and Carlos Morales, I guess, is a former CPS agent who worked for them for a year and said how they shouldn't exist and all of the negative things that they did, that they did things to meet quotas, took kids away that shouldn't have been taken away, and knew they were doing that, and things like that. So, I mean, even when you look at an organization like CPS, and they have some kind of charter or some kind of, I remember on the internet I found some CPS page, and I should go back to it to see what they say there. But they act as if laws don't apply to them. That because they can deem something as an emergency, and they'll bring the police with them, that laws don't apply to them. They can do whatever they want. And if somebody calls and reports something, they're going to investigate that. And it can be an anonymous call. And that's where that gets really dangerous and fucked up. I don't think there should be, if somebody calls anonymously, then well, for one, I don't think the CPS should exist. And I have to kind of say that, prefix that on all the, organizations that are out there, because not believing in government, obviously, I don't believe in any of these organizations, but I'm trying to talk about them from the standpoint of how they exist now and what they're able to do. And if they were to still exist, how they should exist, I guess. But I don't believe they should exist at all. But they definitely, and the police, this is the same with the police. You can make anonymous calls and they'll go and, bust your door down or something, get a warrant based off anonymous calls or based off bullshit informants that are getting paid. So they should have to, and this is what I would do, and I would think that especially when it comes to CPS, but even when it comes to the police, that they should have to meet with whoever is making an allegation. And I don't think they do that. Now, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm like 90-something%. Actually, I am sure, because I know that calls have been made. But it wasn't an anonymous call, but still, it was just over the phone. So I think that they should have to meet with that person. I guess if you talk to them over the phone, but how do you even know who they really are? I guess you can. I guess it depends if it's family or not that you can verify that. But people are estranged from their families, and they could be doing it to fuck with them. You could have neighbors that can say, well, I've been hearing these noises coming from next door that sound like the kids are being beat up, the kids are screaming. I'm even scared about a couple times when my fiance was crying about something and being loud, and that I was nervous when we lived in an apartment, and even where we live now, the houses are pretty close, but I'm not as nervous, but still they are pretty close. But that somebody would call the police and say, well, there's some girl next door it sounds like she's screaming or crying, or like a couple times when she yelled at me, which is not very often does my fiance scream at me. Maybe 2 or 3 times in 3 years. But when she did, it was loud. And when we lived in an apartment, it's like, especially knowing how the police are and how I'll react if the police show up, meaning I won't let them in. And if they try to break down the door, then we're going to have some real issues. But she was loud enough that people could hear her. So I was worried about people calling the police, because you have people like that. You have, and that's one of the biggest things with CPS. One of the biggest issues is you have, and this is not just CPS though. I think this is an issue with people not minding their fucking business. Now, I know there are, people get this shit in their head that, there's people that have been kidnapped and stuff like that. And, again, which is such a small percentage, but from watching the news, they think it's like a huge percentage of girls have been kidnapped or something like that. And they're sex slaves, and they've been sold into slavery and all this shit that they see on the news. And it does happen. However, it happens. It's very rare, but they find the stories and they put them on the news. And then people get this in their head that, oh, well, this could be this going on, so I have to call the police instead of minding their own fucking business. Now, if there's something